Hey guys, Alex with Armadillo Armament. Today, we're going to be talking about you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. Basically, we're customizing the Glock 19, many Glocks in general, and we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of the platform. Before we jump into that, though, like this video if you enjoy my content, subscribe if you enjoy my content, comment down below if you have any suggestions or if you want to have a conversation with me. Red Pawn Shop, I've partnered with. They make kick-ass patches that are armadillos with quad nods and MCXs. Please purchase a patch or a sticker from them. I get a small kickback. You can use code Armadillo for 5% off your order. And every order, every item in the order, he's removing 1 pound of junk from the ocean and planting a tree. So not only are you getting a cool patch, but you are saving the planet. All right. So, Gucci Glocks. The 1911 is America's handgun, right? The M1 Garand is America's rifle, even though it wasn't designed in America. But the Gucci Glock has, in recent years, in my opinion, kind of it's getting up there with the 1911 as America's gun. The Glock is the most popular firearm on the planet at this point. And many people enjoy purchasing them, but then putting upgrades into them. And I see a lot of upgrades that I do agree with and a lot that I don't agree with. So today we're actually going to be discussing how to customize your Glock and my experiences I've had with a lot of these upgrades over time, as well as the hierarchy of what I think is important when you are customizing your Glock. So let's jump into the video. All right, so we're going to start with a Glock 19. This is actually a Glock 44, but for the purposes of this video, it is virtually identical to a Glock 19 in 9mm, except it is chambered in 22 LR. So just pretend this is a Glock 19. The Glock 19 comes out of the box pretty fantastic. You don't really need to do much to it. In fact, I would argue you don't really have to do anything to it. However, talking about the hierarchy of what you should modify in your Glock, the first thing that I would recommend is always going to be a weapon light. Weapon lights, depending on where you sit on that camp or that argument, weapon lights are either mandatory or they're helpful to have. Personally, I wouldn't consider them 100% mandatory. That being said, I carry them on every single gun that I carry. The reason for that is a weapon light takes up this little bit of space over here, and that space is already going to be inside your holster anyway, and it's only going to add a couple ounces to your firearm, and it's going to add a incredible capability. That is white light usage. Right, we're not going to have our nods on us at all times. So having a white light in the off chance you do need positive identification in a dark area, in my opinion, is necessary. If you don't believe that, it's completely up to you. But for the purposes of this video, once again, the TLR7, which I have right here, a TLR7 fits completely flush on the Glock 19 platform. The TLR7 offers 500 lumens, which is more than enough. I have a video on my channel showing what lumens are going to do inside like a structure. 500 lumens is more than enough for positive identification out to basically any indoor distance. The TLR7A has become one of the most popular options in the pistol light sphere because of its compact nature, as well as the switches are pretty phenomenal, and it comes at a very agreeable price point. We're looking at between $100 and $200 versus a X300 or an X300V or an X300 Turbo can be between $300 and $400, if not more, for the V variant. So the Streamlight positions itself very well within the light market, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a concealable weapon light. The other light I'm going to recommend off the bat is going to be the X300 Ultra. The X300 is pushing 1,000 lumens as opposed to 500. It has very good splash, and there are a couple different variants you can choose from. The Turbo is going to have a significantly higher candela, which means the center is going to be a lot more hot. It's going to be a lot more focalized of a light, whereas the Turbo, whereas the X300 Ultra actually has a lot more spill. Personally, I really like the Ultra as well as the X300V, which stands for Vampire, if you need IR capabilities, but that's not really everyone's forte. Between these two lights, you really do cover a majority of situations. It's also important to note, going on to other Glocks, even though this video is going to be more centralized on the Glock 19 platform, the TLR7 sub exists for smaller, compact Glocks, and then the TLR6 also exists, which is only putting out about 100 lumens, but that 100 lumens, once again, can still be more than enough inside of structures. So for the Glock 19, I would stick to the TLR7 and the X300, but choose which one fits your situation better, and if you need something smaller for a more compact Glock, remember the other two options. The reason I started with a weapon light is I think every other attachment after this really is optional. If you buy a Glock and you put a TLR7A, I'm going to make this a little bit tighter. If you put a TLR7A on your Glock 19, and you buy a holster for it by T-Rex, LAS Concealment, Tier 1 Concealed, Tenacor, whichever holster manufacturer you prefer. In my opinion, you have a fighting pistol that is perfectly capable at what it needs to do. Now, I am clearly in optic gang. This is a Trijicon 2.5 MOA SRO with the Jaegerworks shield on it. I love optics. I think optics are the future. But the stock Glock iron sights, plastic sights, but a stock lock with a light and then the original sights, in my opinion, is enough to get the job done. You don't need to spend a lot of money on your Glock to have a capable weapon system, is what I'm saying. Buy this if you're low on money and put a lot of rounds downrange. But, however, if you find that you have a little bit of money sitting around, or if you find that you're proficient with iron sights and you want to step up into red dots because you've heard of all the advantages of such, the next upgrades I'm going to recommend are going to be the sighting system of the Glock 19. Now, the first option is, well, the Glock comes with plastic sights, right? So we can replace these for the metal sights of your choosing. Those being Trijicon HDs. You can get them with tritium, you can get them with a fiber optic, you can get Ameriglows. It's important to know with iron sights, there are many different styles. There are some that are just completely blacked out, some that have triple tritium, some that are running fiber optic at the front. I recommend you do your own research and decide what works for you. That being said, on most of my Glocks, I don't really care too much about the iron sights, really at all, because they are backup, which is going to lead me into the next topic of discussion, and that's going to be the red dot sight. So, I will have a video at a later time talking about the importance of a red dot sight and the advantages of a red dot optic or a green dot optic, but for the purposes of this video, just understand that I prefer them. Now, the reason I said that you can kind of go one or the other when it comes to iron sights is because if you want to have iron sights, that's great. If you want to upgrade to great iron sights and put 10,000 rounds downrange, that's a great use of your money. That's excellent training. But if you want to immediately move into red dots, you're going to want to have a slightly different philosophy of use, really. This SRO, as an example, on a Jaegerworks Bros, currently the iron sights are just barely visible at the bottom of my optic. Now, once again, this is a fairly tall optic because of the Jaegerworks edition. However, the iron sights you get on a normal Glock 19, if you're not thinking about putting a red dot on it, are usually going to be pretty low to the firearm. This means that at a later point in time, if you put a red dot on that firearm, they're not going to either co-witness or they're not even going to be visible in the window. So if you have the extra money lying around, I instead suggest you move directly into red dots. Once again, red dots have many advantages. I'm going to give you guys a quick list of red dots that I've vetted and I personally enjoy. First of all, the Trijicon SRO. Basically, any variation of RMR, you want to go with a Type 2 RMR, in my opinion. However, the auto-adjust models are still pretty good. Hollow Sun units. The HE508T X2 is great. The 507 and the 407 are both excellent. I have had time behind the Acro. I do not like the Delta Point Pro, but many people do. I'd recommend being cautious when it comes to those. And I would probably, this is another video for a later time, I wouldn't 100% recommend closed emitter optics, barring the Acro P2, just because I find they have a lot more issues at this current state of development, really. The new RMR HD and the RCR look fantastic because they're made by Trijicon. However, everything I just mentioned, 508, SRO, RMR, all of those are likely my highest recommendation. So if you have the extra money to put money into your sighting system, I really recommend you do it. Start with either milling your Glock, or many companies have a MOS system or a optic plate system from the factory. Buy a firearm that has that from the factory. Otherwise, you can send your slide to someone like JagerWorks. All right, so you have your Gucci Glock. You have a Glock 19 with a TLR 7A and either a RMR or an SRO. Where do you go from here? Well, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is where my opinion really enters the video. You don't really go anywhere outside of getting diminishing returns or making cosmetic changes to the firearm. If you have a Glock 19 with a TLR 7A and a RMR, wrap it up. You're done. You have arguably the best fighting and concealed carry pistol on the planet, and really nothing needs to change. At this point, it's just little touches that may offer you small percentage increases in usability, or once again, it's going to be completely cosmetic. But if you are interested in throwing a little bit more money at your Glock, I can tell you how to do it. First of all, we're going to talk about serrations and we're going to talk about cuts on a slide. Now, cuts can do a couple things. First of all, they can look cool. That's really the largest purpose of them. I see people with absolutely massive window cuts, and you can make the argument that it does lighten the slide for certain recoil springs. It can make a very small boost in performance. That being said, I have experimented with a lot of different Windows cuts on Glocks, as well as like the 226, 1911s, and I haven't noticed there to be that much of a difference. That being said, if you have a competition Glock 34 setup and it's properly sprung and there's cuts everywhere, it can actually make the pistol a little bit better shooting. A lot of competition people actually do that. Now, the more practical version of that is going to be serrations. Currently, I have a Gray Ghost Precision slide on this firearm right now, and these serrations are incredibly deep. Now, what are the purpose of serrations? Well, that's for press checking. I can't think of any other reason to have a serration on your firearm other than press checks. And once again, they kind of look cool, I guess. A press check, if you don't know, is basically the ability to check your chamber without, using your optic to reciprocate the slide or coming back behind the optic. If you have an optic on your firearm, you're probably going to be press checking a lot just because you don't want to be using that optic to do your manipulation. I press check all the time. People say press checks are LARPy, and I really couldn't care less. The press check when I'm leaving the house and I chamber my firearm and put it in my pants, this is unloaded, guys. A lot of the times before I step out that door, I'll just whip out my firearm, do a quick press check. Oh, I see brass, done. You could argue you can use this indicator right here. That being said, I really like these slide serrations. Really deep slide serrations, when your hands get oily, when your hands get bloody, you'll notice that maybe not as much your fine motor skills are going to be worse, but you're just going to have a very hard time grabbing onto that slide. Really deep slide serrations I consider to be a actual worthwhile investment. If you do send your slide to someone like Wager Machine or JagerWorks, when they are milling your dot, you can actually ask for slide serrations, and it'll only be $50 to $100. So if you don't have slide serrations you like, or if you want to add slide serrations to a firearm that doesn't have front slide serrations, I think it's a worthwhile upgrade. But once again, guys, we're really getting into the singular percent increases at this point. Now, after serrations, once again, we're not really doing much to the firearm outside of cosmetics, where we're going to be talking about barrels, threaded barrels, and compensators. Starting at the most useful, compensators. Compensators are phenomenal. This is going to be turning into a Roland special build in the next couple days, actually, which I'll have a video on. But what a compensator does is it's going to redirect gases upwards and to the sides in some situations. I'll put some videos on the screen right now. A Roland special build is incredibly controllable. It's a little bit more finicky to operate, but it is incredibly controllable. That's the point of it. It almost turns it into an open gun. Now, in order to have a compensator on your firearm, you need a threaded barrel. Threaded barrels are going to coincide with the compensator. You want to make sure you have the right like thread pitch. Um, that being said, compensators obviously require a threaded barrel. There are some gimmicky ones that just attach to like the guide rod. I would recommend you stay away from those. You really want to thread your compensator onto your barrel. But when you do add a compensator to your system, understand you are potentially ruining your Glock. So the Glock is perfectly sprung from the factory. The recoil spring is just tight enough or just sprung enough that it is going to ensure reliable function on your Glock. When you add a compensator, there are some that work on OEM springs, like my Roland video. However, there are a lot, like let's say the KKM, which offer very great performance increases, 50% recoil reduction, but you really need to start playing with those spring weights. So if you add a compensator and you're really not paying close attention and you're not testing your ammo and testing your springs, you can find that your reliability just falls off a cliff. That's important because this is very likely your self-defense firearm, and it's a lot better to have a Glock that fires, which has nothing on it outside of a light, versus a Gucci Roland special build that doesn't even operate. Okay. So do understand that compensators do have a significant downside, as well as they are huge. The compensator on this Glock is going to be extending to my X300 in the next couple days. That's a lot of gun to fit in your pants. Here is a Filster floodlight for reference. This is what I'm going to be appendix carrying in a different holster actually, but this is what I'm going to be appendix carrying. Many of you are used to carrying something as small like a Glock 43. There is a massive difference between those two, right? So, once again, compensators, they have a time and a place. If this is your duty gun and it's sprung correctly and you are carrying an outside the waistband holster, maybe it's worth it to look into making a roll-in type build. But if you are just conceal carrying and you're just a gun guy that doesn't care about testing all these different ammos and springs, honestly, sticking with the stock OEM barrel is likely a better idea. Now, speaking of barrels, the Glock barrel. Glock barrels are fantastic, guys. I don't know many people that can shoot out a Glock barrel. This is actually a OEM barrel with a thread protector on it, and I am not personally capable of putting fist-size holes in paper at 15 yards with a pretty good tempo. Very little people are. So the OEM barrel, in my opinion, is more than adequate for whatever you need to use it for. With my MR920, I don't have this on video, but with my MR920, famously amongst my friends, I hit 14 shots on steel at 100 yards. It's not an incredibly difficult shot, especially with a zeroed red dot. Red dots really do make the shooting experience so much better, but I was able to get 14 shots on a human steel silhouette, chest steel silhouette at 100 yards. And that was with a OEM barrel. So trust me, it's more accurate than you. You don't need to upgrade. If you do want to upgrade, you really want to stick with very quality components. Please don't go out and buy a tin barrel made by some whatever company or a rainbow barrel made by some whatever company for $40. Glock barrels are incredibly well produced. They're incredibly reliable. And a lot of these companies, like I'm going to throw out a name right here, Zafferty Precision, a lot of people have a lot of issues with these companies that make this gold plated and tin plated and rainbow accessories. They find that they just don't work. If you really have to upgrade your barrel, maybe moving to a threaded barrel makes sense, especially if you're going the compensator route, but you want to stay to really vetted barrels like Silencer Co. or like Parker Mountain Machine. They have a compensator system as well. But once again, it's just going to cost a lot of money, and it's really not going to do anything unless you move to a compensator. Now, if you are running suppressed, that's a different story. Threaded barrels kind of started their life as a suppressor host. Suppressing pistols, though, just really sucks. So it's fun, but do understand, once again, this is a concealed carry firearm. In my opinion, just stick with OEM, guys. OEM works. Now, a couple more things. Triggers. Oh boy, time to rant. So, the Glock community is filled with a lot of people that really like the Glock because it just functions. It's not aesthetically the most pretty firearm, even though I think they look really cool. Um, the triggers suck. The MOS plates suck. Magazine capacity could be greater. SIG's doing really cool stuff with that in recent years. And Glock people really like to gloat about the fact that they just use a firearm that works. In the same sentence, Glock people upgrade the trigger on their Glock and say, oh, the Glock trigger is so shit, I'm just going to upgrade the trigger in every Glock I own. And 99% of the time they fuck it up. Um, I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys, and this isn't a slight against manufacturers that make different triggers and different trigger shoes, but I genuinely do not think you should touch your Glock trigger. This is a MR920 trigger, so this is from the factory, a different trigger. This is, of course, different than a Glock OEM, like let's say this Glock 44, which has a very stout wall and it's actually a fairly nice trigger. I happen to like Glock triggers a lot, but this MR920 has a lot more creep in it, and honestly, arguably, I'd say it's a worse trigger than stock Glock. Um, but I really want to communicate through this video that I really don't think you should touch your Glock trigger. If you change the barrel on a Glock, even if it's not the highest quality barrel, I find that a lot of Glocks will kind of like break them in and make them work. Same with a lot of like OEM internals. Like a bad OEM internal can affect your reliability, but a lot of the time a Glock will kind of like power through it. Triggers can create an absolute non-starter of your firearm. I see so many trigger shoes and so many triggers online that completely torpedo the reliability of your Glock. If you want to look at the Johnny Glock system, and I don't even know all the brands, but if you want to look at these other the Ghost triggers and like minus connectors, if you want to look at those, sure, but from one Glock person to another, and I've been down the road of Glocks many times. I've have a 43X custom build that's missing a slide right now. 44 is my stock trigger. My 43 is a stock trigger, which is not on this table. Oh, there it is. My 43 is a stock trigger. And every one of them you just adapt to and you get proficient with, okay? If you must change it, then really do your research before you do so. But in my personal opinion, leave the trigger alone because the trigger on a Glock is it's like this for a reason. And I've seen so many people completely destroy their Glocks by changing the trigger. Glock does have a performance trigger out right now. If you have to change it, maybe look at the performance trigger. But even then, I've seen issues from people like Ben Stoger online, a phenomenal shooter. Even he reports issues with that trigger. Just leave it alone. If you want a gun with a better trigger, go buy a 1911, man. Go buy a 2011. Go buy an M&P. Go buy a Walther PDP. Those all have their issues, but just go buy a different gun. Leave your Glock trigger where it is. Moving down the firearm, we have Magwells. Magwells are another thing that offer very small performance increases. I don't consider a Magwell to be necessary or mandatory. That being said, my favorite part about the Magwell isn't the fact that I can reload quickly, because honestly, I reload perfectly fine without it. We'll demonstrate that on the 43X a little bit. Nope, I won't because it fell on the ground. I reload perfectly fine. I'm not even looking. You don't need a Magwell on your carry gun. But the biggest benefit of a Magwell, in my opinion, actually, is just the fact that it compacts your hand and offers you a much more stable shooting platform. Without the Magwell, I shoot it perfectly fine. With the Magwell, I find that my recoil control is actually slightly better. Once again, that's just because my fingers are being smushed into the firearm and really capturing it between that undercut and the Magwell. So don't spend a lot of money on a Magwell. Don't carry a massive Magwell because it's going to lead to more printing. But if you have a little bit of extra money lying around and you want to customize and you think Magwells look cool, you can throw a Magwell on. The last thing we're going to cover, and I like to leave the worst for last, is going to be really dumb upgrades like tungsten guide rods, right? The guide rod in the Glock is perfectly fine, guys. Leave it alone. Tungsten guide rods that add a couple ounces to your system really don't offer any benefit outside of being really expensive. you're going to be changing your springs and your guide rods every couple thousand rounds, or probably more than that. I've brought Glocks to 10,000 rounds before, and adding a tungsten guide rod into the system that instead needs to be changed is just going to drain your wallet. That money would be much better spent on ammunition. And that's also kind of a recurring theme of this video. You can go absolutely buck wild with the Glock. You can buy $200 sights and a $600, $700 optic and a $300 threaded barrel, $300 light, $150 Magwell, $300 Glock Trigger. I don't know how companies are charging $300 for Glock triggers, but they're somehow getting away with it. This Gregos Precision slide is fantastic, but this slide is $400 online. I got this for a crazy deal, so hush. But I see people take slides and do $500 worth of work to them. I see people take their frames and do $500 worth of stippling to them, which I didn't mention in this video, but the Glock Basic grip, the Glock Basic stippling is actually really good the way it is, especially if you're carrying it. If you have to change it, you can do stippling online with a lot of really great manufacturers that offer stippling, but stippling can be $100, $200, $300, $400. In my opinion, I would either stick with OEM, or if you have to change it, Talon grips. Talon grips cost $15, and honestly, they're a lot more aggressive than a lot of these stippling companies, and they look pretty cool. Not as cool as stippling, but then again, you're also not permanently harming your frame. So think about that. But once again, back to the recurring theme of this video is money does not really equal performance. Money up to about 500 to 1,000 has a direct correlation with your ability, with your firearms ability, right? Adding a RMR for $300 you found used, and then adding a TLR 7A that you found used for $100, congratulations. For $800, $900, you now have arguably the best pistol on the planet. That being said, when you get into Gucci territory, every $100 after about 1,000, in my opinion, it falls off of a cliff. If you are a college student, which a lot of us are, or if you are a dude living in an apartment, or you're not making six figures a year, your money is a lot better spent on ammunition. I always ask myself when I buy a piece of kit or I buy a barrel or a new light or whatever, I always ask myself, would I rather have this $300 light or would I rather have 700 to 1,000 rounds of 9mm ammunition, right? Probably about 1,000 rounds of 9mm. And for this X300, I said, oh no, I'd rather have the X300 because it offers me great capability that ammunition won't give me, right? Same with this SRO. I want to be target focused and I want to have a better shooting experience, so this is worth it. But then when it comes to like upgrading the trigger, would I rather have a better trigger that probably doesn't work, or would I rather have 500 rounds of ammunition? I'd rather have 500 rounds of ammunition. Would I rather purchase magazine base pads that cost $50 a piece for some reason, or would I rather have 200 rounds of 9mm? I'd rather have 200 rounds of 9mm, guys. So just be smart with your purchases. Gun ownership, it's really easy to get kind of lost in the sauce, but the most important part about owning a gun is training with said gun so you can become proficient at it. That's about all I have to say on the Gucci Glock. Like I said, the Gucci Glock in many ways is kind of becoming America's firearm, if not already. The 1911 will always have a place in my heart, but so many people have Glocks nowadays, and they're the future moving forward realistically, that I think we need to be smart with our purchases, and I think we need to talk about our experiences with those. So, if you enjoyed this video, please like. If you have any disagreements or if you want to continue the conversation, please do so down below. I'd love to get into another shit-throwing fight as my comment sections normally turn into. This has been Alex with Armadillo Armament. Spend your money wisely, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.